Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, welcome to Edison Library North. I'm Dr. Michael Rothman, and tonight we're going to be talking about ways to naturally lower your cholesterol. And hopefully I'm going to talk about some information that you haven't heard before, because if you heard it all before, then no reason to hear the same thing again. So I think there will be some things that may hopefully interest you and surprise you tonight. Just to further introduce myself, I'm board certified in internal medicine and emergency medicine. I have a clinic currently in East Brunswick, New Jersey, called MD Wellness. We will be relocating to Red Bank, New Jersey very shortly, in fact, in September of this year. And that's our logo, MD Wellness. MD stands for metabolically directed, meaning that the treatments that I give to patients is really directed at their metabolism rather than directed at their symptoms or their diseases. So I'm going to jump right in. And I have this first slide up here to really sort of introduce you to this concept of cholesterol and how what you may be thinking about it may be very different from the reality of cholesterol. Let's just look at this study. This is a study that was published in a major journal in the year 2000, the Journal of the American Medical Association. And it was done in Italy, and they looked at, it was very simple. What was the cholesterol level of the patient, and did the patient die when they were in the hospital? And let's look at the results. This is for people that are over 65. So if you're over 65, you would qualify to be in this study. If you're under 65, not. But the reason I put this in here as the first slide is just sort of wake you up. Let's look at the results. So the mortality was inversely related to cholesterol levels. If the cholesterol was less than 160, the death rate was 5.2%. That means that if you had a cholesterol less than 160 and were admitted to the hospital in Italy between 1993 and 1998 in one of these 81 centers, you had a 5.2% chance of not leaving the hospital alive. That's pretty scary. That's more than 1 out of 20 people died in the hospital if their cholesterol was less than 160. However, the good news is if the cholesterol was between 160 and 199, the death rate dropped to 2.2%. And if the cholesterol was between 200 and 239, the death rate further dropped to 1.6%. And if the cholesterol was over 240, the death rate stayed right around 1.7%. And you may be saying, Doc, that sounds exactly the opposite of what I would think. Isn't high cholesterol bad? Isn't that why we're here tonight, to learn how to lower our cholesterol? Yeah. Well, actually, when you walk out of this room tonight, I hope you think differently and think that maybe it's not so important necessarily to lower your cholesterol, or if you do have high cholesterol, why is it high? Because cholesterol is a very, very important, very misunderstood molecule in the body. And this is not an isolated, cherry-picked study. There's many, many studies that have shown the same thing. They won't do this study anymore. Why? Because they're going to get the same results, and they don't want the same results to come out. It's true. I'm not making this up. I didn't write this. Again, this is published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So what does cholesterol do? Is it there just to clog our arteries and cause all sorts of horrible diseases? Well, no, it's not. In fact, every single living animal organism on this planet, every cell of every organism that's animal-based has cholesterol within the cell. It is vitally important for life, all life. And we put a tremendous amount of energy into creating this molecule. Why would we do that if it was a poison? So cholesterol, it provides raw material for, and I'll get into more detail on this, for adrenal hormones, sex hormones, vitamin D, bile salts. As I mentioned, an integral part of cell membranes. It helps control membrane permeability and really has antioxidant properties. You've all heard of antioxidants. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Cholesterol is one of the most important antioxidants in your body. That's the purpose of cholesterol. It's not there to kill us. It's not there to clog our arteries. But it has become demonized by people that want to demonize it for whatever reasons they have to do that. This is a schematic representation of the cholesterol molecule. Maybe you've seen this in a biochemistry book, but Comes right from a biochemistry book. So where does it come from in our bodies? About 25% of it will be coming from your dietary sources. Most of it's made in your liver, and your liver puts a lot of energy into making this particular product. And if you don't eat cholesterol, your body will make it because you need it to protect your cell membranes from damage. The more you eat, the less your liver has to make. The less you eat, the more your liver has to make. And basically, you'll make as much as you need at all times. So why do some people need more cholesterol? Really becomes the question. And if your cholesterol is high, you know, when I see a patient in my office and their cholesterol is high, my first reaction is, my goodness, what's causing this high cholesterol? Not, oh my God, I better give you a prescription to lower it, or give you some herb to lower it, or give you some other stuff to lower it. And if you came here tonight thinking that I was going to tell you all about the wonders of fish oil and red yeast rice and niacin and some of these other remedies for high cholesterol, you might as well leave now, because I'm not going to talk about these things, because it's really not important to do that. What you want to do is have healthy cholesterol levels, and you want to not cause those conditions that require high levels of cholesterol in the first place. So how do we get rid of the cholesterol? 98% of the cholesterol actually is excreted through something called your bile salts, which comes from your liver. But your body will recycle 90% of that. Why do we recycle the bile salts? Because there's very, very valuable material in there called cholesterol. If it was so horrible, we would just poop the whole thing out and we would get rid of it. But we put a lot of energy into making it, and we put a lot of energy into recycling it because it's vitally important for our health. So the cholesterol level will rise when your body senses that it needs more to fulfill this vital role, and the liver is one of the main players in there. You know, if you take you've heard of these medications, the so-called statin drugs, right? And you've probably heard of side effects of statin drugs. Some of those effects are you get muscle burning and aching and weakness and other types of things. But really, I don't really believe that's a side effect of the drug. What happens is a patient's cholesterol will go up because they need that cholesterol to protect their tissues from damage. And then you artificially lower the cholesterol with that drug, and damage occurs. That's not a side effect of a drug. That's not enough cholesterol in your tissues to protect you from damage. And so if you look at the entire side effect profile, or almost the entire side effect profile of these drugs, those aren't side effects at all. It's the effects of not having enough cholesterol to protect you from the damage that's going on because you don't have enough cholesterol to protect your cells. So what causes your cholesterol to go up in the first place is really what I want to touch on tonight. And how do we avoid that damage in the first place so that you can have normal cholesterol levels? So some of these things are oxidative stress, and I'm going to define these more thoroughly in a few minutes. Mineral deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies, thyroid disease, and the wastebasket term stress, which we've all heard thrown out a zillion times. And stress basically is a lot of different things. But let me just say for now that stress is basically anything that you come in contact with, whether it's foods that you're eating, situations that occur, emotional things, staying up too late, ingesting things that are bad for you. This is all stressful. And so any type of stress will cause damage to your body's systems and your tissues, and the cholesterol will go up to protect your cells from that sort of damage. So let's start with oxidative stress. Raise your hand if you've heard this term before. Oxidative stress, antioxidants. You've heard of antioxidants, right? Everybody's heard of antioxidants. And free radicals. Okay, you can't go anywhere without hearing about things because everybody and their mother is selling vitamins and claiming that they have antioxidant properties. And a lot of them do, but it's certainly a catchphrase. But this is very, very important information. Information, by the way, that I really didn't learn in medical school. I don't know if they're learning it now, but I didn't learn any of this in medical school, what I'm going to be talking about now. Or if we did, it was in a very scientific biochemistry related situation, and then we would just turn the page and never talk about it again. We never talked about how oxidative stress caused diseases. We just talked about it in that first semester of medical school with 6 other classes, and we just memorized all this stuff, turned the page, and then we went on, because that stuff wasn't important. It was important, but we didn't really learn it to be important. But it's very, very important to understand body chemistry. So oxidative stress, this is also known as free radicals. And as I mentioned before, cholesterol has important antioxidant properties. Basically, the bottom line is we need oxygen to create energy. We burn stuff with oxygen. If you had a fire and you got rid of all the oxygen, the fire would go out. We have little furnaces in our body called mitochondria where we make energy. And if it wasn't for oxygen, those little furnaces would not work. The flip side of this is when you burn stuff, damage occurs. You can start to burn down the house if if your fireplace is out of control. If your oxidative processes are out of control in your body, you will create excessive free radicals. We need a certain amount of free radicals to actually create that energy and to function. But too many free radicals, too much oxidative stress, will cause damage. And when that occurs, when that damage occurs, then the cholesterol will go up to protect your cell membranes. So how do we get excessive oxidative stress? There's a pretty long list here, but fried foods. If you're eating things that are burnt or fried, you're actually putting pro-oxidants. You're putting free radicals in your body. You've heard fried foods are bad. You people have no idea how bad they are. Every time you eat a French fry or something fried, you are killing yourself. You are actually putting free radicals in there. You're causing aging at the cellular level and at the tissue level. And when that damage occurs, your cholesterol will go up to try to put the fire out, so to speak. Vegetable oils. These things are being sold as the good oils. Oh, yes, don't use saturated fat. Those are bad, they tell you. Use these vegetable oils. Corn oil and soy oil are being added to everything, and canola oil. We're going to have a little game here. I'm going to give you a quiz. Where does olive oil come from? Okay, very good. Where does peanut oil come from? Okay. Where does canola oil come from? Right. Okay, first of all, canola is a brand name. Canadian oil. Canadian oil. So it actually comes from rapeseed. R-A-P-E, like you've been raped. And if you think that canola oil is good for you, you have been raped. Rapeseed is actually poisonous. And if you ever saw the movie Lorenzo's Oil, they talked about rapeseed being poisonous in there. So there's a special form of rapeseed that grows in Canada that's less poisonous than the regular rapeseed. And then they take it and they process the heck out of it, and they say that it's good for you because it's low in saturated fats and doesn't have any cholesterol and it's high in monounsaturates. Just because something is low in something or high in this doesn't mean it's good for you. And this is a way that they're trying to actually take your health away. Now, I've written a book. It's called Metabolic Stress: How the Lies You Are Being Fed Are Making You Sick. And canola oil is one of those lies. And the fact that, not the fact, the notion that saturated fat is bad for us is a lie that's making you sick. The notion that dietary cholesterol is bad for you is a lie that's making you sick because you're avoiding these things and eating other things. How many people heard this story? I'm sure most of you did, that there is a study that's coming out in atherosclerosis online where they compared egg yolks to smoking cigarettes. Did you hear this story? Yeah, it's everywhere.
Is that true?
It is true that they put out this article stating that eating egg yolks is as bad as smoking cigarettes. Okay? This is total nonsense, and I think it's very irresponsible for them to actually put these things out, but they do this because they want to perpetuate what I would call the big fat lie. And we'll talk about this a little bit further, but this is really, really bad for your health to avoid things that are good for you. Now, don't get me wrong. If you take an egg and you fry it in vegetable oil, it's poisonous. If you take an egg and microwave the heck out of it, it's poisonous. If you eat your eggs with, bacon that's laced with nitrates and nitrates to cure the bacon, well, that's poisonous. And if you're slurping down your eggs with a glass of orange juice full of sugar, that's also poisonous. So how did they figure out, this study actually they just had people fill out a questionnaire about how much they ate, how many eggs they ate going back decades, and decided that the people that said they ate more eggs yolks had a higher levels of disease than people that said they didn't eat less egg yolks. And I mean, it's so unscientific. And for them to come to those conclusions is ridiculous. I actually wrote an op-ed blog that is going to be coming out on my website any day about this.
So what is the proper way for eating it?
Boiled or poached. Or leave the yolks runny so you don't burn the cholesterol. So when you burn the cholesterol, you've oxidized it, you've burnt it, and now you're ingesting free radicals into your system. This is very bad for you. I don't recommend this.
Can I ask one more question? The difference between when you say fried food and sauteed.
What is the difference between fried and sauteed? I guess it's the degree of how much you've fried it. Sauteed would be lightly fried, and so sauteed is less bad than fried, but it's still usually part of whatever you're cooking is going to be fried. Yes?
What about soft-boiled eggs?
Soft-boiled eggs? Soft-boiled eggs would be fine. Hard-boiled eggs are fine. The thing about boiled eggs is that the temperature of boiling water is 212 degrees Fahrenheit and 100 degrees centigrade by definition. And you will not destroy or oxidize or burn up any of the fats in there or the cholesterol at that temperature.
So are eggs good for you or not? If you cook them the right way, they're not going to bother you.
Are eggs good for you or not? If cooked properly, eggs are one of the most healthy foods that you could possibly put into your body. Extremely healthy. Okay, let's continue on then. So excess sugar. Excuse me? The egg yolk, what? Will raise your cholesterol. Will egg yolks raise your cholesterol? If you do not, there are certain people that shouldn't eat a lot of eggs, but you'd have to eat quite a few eggs to raise your cholesterol. And maybe raising your cholesterol is a good thing. If you looked at that first slide, if you're over 65, there's many studies showing that the higher cholesterol, the longer you will live once you reach the age of 65. Let me just speak to that for a moment. Well, why doesn't it not work for someone who's 40 years old then, or 35? And here's why. Imagine you're a 40-year-old person, and you have all sorts of oxidative stress going on in your body. Things are burning up. Your tissues are inflamed. You've been eating all the wrong foods and doing all the wrong things, and your cholesterol goes way high. That cholesterol gets burnt in the process, combines with calcium, and clogs your arteries. And they say, look, this person had high cholesterol, and they died of a heart attack, and the cholesterol clogged their arteries. But it wasn't from eating the cholesterol that killed them. It was from all those, the inflammation is what killed them in the first place. But statistically, some people that have high cholesterol will die of a heart attack. But statistically, 40% of every person that has a heart attack actually has cholesterol less than 160. Well, how do you explain that then? It's the burnt cholesterol. It's the inflammation that leads to disease. And while we're on the topic, I mentioned calcium. Calcium clogs your arteries. That's part of the plaque. That's why it used to be called arterial sclerosis. They changed the name to protect the innocent. Do you hear people saying, oh, since calcium clogs your arteries, you better go on a low calcium diet? Do you hear this? No. They tell you to take calcium, right? So the notion that's just because something's clogging your arteries, we should lower our intake of it, it flies in the face of the calcium thing then, doesn't it? Because calcium depositing in all sorts of places in your body is a sign of aging. And yet, they are recommending calcium in sickening levels to many people. That's a whole nother talk. But I just want to use that as an example to get you to think about what they're really promoting out there and how it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Can you just define oxidative stress?
You want me to talk about oxidative stress more?
You mentioned it at the very beginning.
Right, and I just spent some. It is the burning of tissue. It's the creation of free radicals from the use of oxygen. Okay, it's almost like the sparks that fly off your fireplace. These free radicals that can burn down your house if you're not careful. So we need these fire extinguishers in there. And the fire extinguishers are the antioxidants, cholesterol being one of the most important antioxidants in your body. So let me just get back to this presentation. So other things that can lead to excessive oxidative stress are excessive amounts of sugars, carbohydrates, and infection. When your body senses an infection, it will try to kill the bacteria, the virus. How does it kill it? It oxidizes it. It bleaches it. And then that's why you feel achy when you have the flu. And you feel lousy because there's all this oxidative stress occurring. Environmental and nutritional toxins. Anything that your body is taking in that's not good for it is going to cause stress, including oxidative stress. And all of these things will raise your cholesterol. Too much activity can also raise your cholesterol because we need to have a certain amount of rest. Mineral deficiencies can contribute to high cholesterol. I mentioned just a few here: copper, iodine, chromium, and magnesium. There are others. So you may ask, well, what causes the mineral deficiencies in the first place? And the answer is, well, junk food, processed food, white flour, white sugar, white rice. All of these things are white. Why? Because they've taken all the minerals out of them, and what's left is this white stuff. Why do they take the minerals and the vitamins and the fiber out of foods? Anybody have any idea?
Cheap way to process it?
Not necessarily. Extend the shelf life. Thank you. Yeah, it's all about money. Yeah, so they take all these things out because it basically becomes dead. Live things will rot. If it's already inert, it doesn't rot. So yeah, I mean, bread that's white bread or white, actually the flour itself can last for a long, long time without needing to be frozen and without rancidifying. So they take all these vitamins and minerals and fiber out, and then they put it back in artificial forms. And so a lot of these fortified foods, if you're buying a food and they have to add the vitamins in there or add the minerals, you're in trouble if you're eating a lot of these foods. And most people are eating these convenient foods that come out of a box that have added vitamins and minerals. And they actually advertise, they say, look how wonderful these things are. They're all fortified. Have your breakfast cereal with all it's fortified with 100% of the recommended daily allowance. Do not buy these products. They're very bad for you. The minerals and the vitamins they're putting in there are really, really terribly poor forms of these vitamins. They're the cheapest, most inactive forms. You might as well be eating rocks off the street. I'm serious. Some of the mineral properties that you're getting. So I'm going to get to the end what you should eat, okay? Yes, ma'am.
In my culture, majority people eat white sugar and white rice.
And?
And they still have a cholesterol thing. And they still eat it.
Right. So, okay, so they eat bad food and their cholesterol is bad, right?
Yeah.
What country are you from?
India.
India. Okay. Let me segue off and talk about India. In India, there's a health food that traditionally people would consume, and they've been consuming this for thousands of years. It's called ghee, right?
I don't know.
You don't know? What kind of Indian are you? Okay. So ghee. What is ghee? It's butter. Butter, yes. Clarified butter with all the carbohydrates and all the sugars taken. It's pure saturated fat and cholesterol. This is considered a health food in India because a lot of the Hindus, correct me if I'm wrong, are vegetarians, and they'll eat bread and vegetables, and they'll have ghee with every single meal with their bread and their vegetables. Then what happens is they come to this country and they learn about the dangers of cholesterol, and they continue their diet of bread and vegetables, except for one big difference. They stop using ghee. And then what happens? They gain weight, their thyroids explode, their health goes bad, they become diabetic, they develop heart disease, and they die.
So what's the thyroid related with the cholesterol?
Okay, I'm going to get into that in a moment, about the thyroid-cholesterol connection. Too many carbohydrates can raise your cholesterol as well through many, many mechanisms. But the point I'm trying to make is that ghee has been used for thousands and thousands of years, and it's very, very, it's a health food, and yet how can it be bad for you and good for you at the same time? This doesn't make any sense. When you hear these so-called paradoxes, there's so many paradoxes related to saturated fat and cholesterol, it's ridiculous. They're not paradoxes at all. They're just that you're dealing with things that are not factual. If you understand the real purpose of cholesterol in your body, you realize these are not paradoxes at all. It's actually, it all makes sense. Yes, sir?
in this country, in the U.S., with the natural butter that we have, would that be comparable to ghee?
It's similar, yeah.
Natural butter, not the margarine.
No, real butter is
real butter.
Real butter.
I know it has like 2 or 3 elements in that.
No, real butter has no detrimental properties. It's got cholesterol and saturated fat. It's been demonized because it has cholesterol and saturated fat. This is a product of the food corporations. Back 70 years ago or so, the food companies decided they want to increase their profit margins. So what do? They wanted to sell people vegetable oils and margarine. And they demonized cholesterol and saturated fat, saying that these things are poisonous, with no proof, no real proof. And so they had this campaign to do this. And they lowered their costs, kept their prices the same, and increased their profit margins. And for whatever reasons, the American Medical Association, the American Heart Association, the American Diabetes Association has adopted this information. The entire food pyramid was created by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture represents the agricultural industry. And yet, so many dietary recommendations are based on the food pyramid, whose sole purpose is to increase profitability in the food companies. So it's pretty scary. But I do believe that they want you to eat lots of carbohydrates and keep your fats low, because if you keep your fats low, you'll be hungry all the time, and then you'll eat a bunch of carbohydrates. And the food pyramid is based on eating 6 to 11 servings of carbohydrates a day. That's where the profit is in the food companies. Other vitamin deficiencies, especially antioxidants, can raise your cholesterol levels. And again, the same culprits: junk food, overly processed food, toxins. I'm going to talk about thyroid. This is a huge, huge connection. And whenever I see a patient that has high cholesterol, one of the first things that I suspect is that they have a thyroid problem. And a lot of people will say, well, doc, it can't be my thyroid because my doctor checked it and the numbers are normal. And I will tell them that the numbers are lying to you. The normal range for thyroid stimulating hormone is like this, when it should be like this. And so all these people that fall over here are told that it's normal. And that test by itself is actually unreliable anyway. Let me show you this study here. By the way, everything I'm telling you, I'm not making anything up. I'm not trying to sell you butter. I'm not the butter salesman. I am trying to sell you something, and I'm trying to sell you on the fact that I understand human physiology and body chemistry, and then I'm a physician that thinks outside the box and understands how the body works. That's what I'm selling. Okay? This is a study looking at the TSH. These are the normal ranges. This is within the normal range. The normal range on most assays is between 0.5 and 4.5. So 4.5 would actually be out here. And this study showed, and it was a huge study, that as the thyroid stimulating hormone goes up, in other words, as you become more hypothyroid, in other words, low thyroid function, the bad cholesterol, the so-called bad cholesterol, goes up in almost a straight line. This is for women, and this is for men. So if your TSH is 3, for example, and you go to your doctor, he'll say, well, that's normal. Can't be your thyroid. But meanwhile, your LDL just went up quite a bit. The flip side of this is as the TSH goes up, in other words, as you become more hypothyroid, the good cholesterol drops. So this is scientific fact. This has been shown over and over again. And in fact, the normal thyroid stimulating hormone level should be about 1.4. If your TSH is over 2.0, you almost always have some problem. And you can have even low TSH. There's so many other things that can affect your thyroid stimulating hormone. This is not an adequate way to assess hypothyroidism. But I can tell you, if your cholesterol is really high, or your HDL is too low, and you're fatigued, and you can't lose weight, and you're constipated, and you're depressed, there's a good chance that you may have a problem with your thyroid. It's not very good for business to treat your thyroid, though. It's a lot better for business to give you antidepressants, give you drugs to lower your cholesterol, give you drugs for your irritable bowel syndrome, give you drugs for this, that, and the other thing, and then just say, well, your thyroid's OK because the TSH is normal. So their conclusion, this is the European Journal of Endocrinology, within the range of TSH that is considered clinically normal, we found that increased levels of TSH was associated with less favorable lipid concentrations. So the whole thyroid metabolism, it's fairly complicated. I put this diagram on here. But there's signals that come from your hypothalamus, your pituitary gland, your thyroid put out hormone. But if you have problems with your hypothalamic function, in other words, in your brain, and in your pituitary, it can affect your thyroid function because there's a pecking order, so to speak, and all sorts of these stressors that I'm talking about actually will affect your brain chemistry. So if, for example, you're consuming MSG or aspartame. Let me give you an example of aspartame as something poisonous like this. Aspartame has 0 calories, yet it can make you fat because it'll affect part of your hypothalamus that controls your weight, and then your body, you'll actually increase your body weight. You'll get hungry, eat more easily, you won't burn the fat, yet it has 0 calories. So this notion that eating dietetic foods that have no sugar and 0 calories is going to help you lose weight is totally erroneous. And not only that, these things are not good for you at all. In fact, aspartame, do you know what company makes aspartame? No, actually it's Monsanto.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Wasn't it Chinese company that did it?
Why was aspartame originally developed? Aspartame was an insecticide. And one day, legend has it that one of the researchers accidentally licked their fingers, and there was some aspartame on the fingers, and said, wow, this is really sweet. And they decided to market this as a sweetener instead of an insecticide. It has the same properties. It kills insects by destroying the insect's nervous system. And a lot of these effects related to aspartame are actually caused by neuroexcitotoxins. They're changing the name of aspartame now, by the way, to amino sweet. Why are they changing the name? Because a lot of people realize now that aspartame is poisonous. So what are they going to do? Change the name. That's what they do. Because the lies you are being fed are making you sick. I guarantee you that every single person in this room, except if you're a patient of mine, is poisoning themselves pretty much at every single meal without even knowing it, even if you're trying to be good and following what they're telling you to do. So what causes low thyroid function? There's many, many different things. You could be consuming, well, chlorine, for example. Taking a shower will hurt your thyroid if you have chlorine in your water. Fluoride will hurt your thyroid. Bromine that they're putting in the white bread will hurt your thyroid. If you're under a lot of stress and your cortisol levels are high, if you're diabetic and your insulin levels are high, all sorts of hormonal imbalances, depressed levels of other hormones, mineral imbalances, immune system stress, all of this can affect your thyroid. It's a very, very delicate and intricate system, and the thyroid is caught in the crossfire of a lot of these functions. Specific foods that can interfere with thyroid function, and I apologize if some of these things are out of order in your handout. Soy is one of the biggest culprits for hurting your thyroid. You may be thinking, but doc, isn't soy really good for you? Soy is one of the biggest scams around. Why is it good? Why is soy good? Well, it's high in protein, protein that you cannot digest. But it's low in saturated fat that you need to be healthy. And it doesn't have cholesterol that you need to be healthy. But don't they eat soy in the Orient? Isn't that their main staple of food? Do you eat ketchup? Do you eat mustard? Soy is a condiment, or it was. The only people that really consume lots of soy are people that have been duped into thinking that it's good for them. Soy has estrogenic properties. If you're a woman, this can make hormonal imbalances worse, can contribute to breast cancer, uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, other hormonal imbalances. If you're a man, it'll lower your testosterone levels effectively. It can lead to prostate problems. In fact, the ancient monks used to consume soy to reduce their libido so that they could remain celibate.
What about
Tofu is less bad, but the processed soy in large quantities is really the worst things.
What about
Soy
soy milk?
milk?
Yeah.
I would not recommend that for anybody for any reason. It's poisonous. Almonds are way overrated. Why are almonds good? Almonds are good because they're low in cholesterol, low in saturated fat, and high in protein. Does that make them good for you? No. So there's a whole, and this is all part of the big fat lie, there's a whole group of foods that are good because they don't have saturated fat and cholesterol. And so people are consuming nuts. They're going nuts with nuts, and they're eating soy like it's coming out of, like it's going out of style.
How about other beans?
What's that?
Other beans.
What kind of beans?
Lima?
Kidney beans. They're okay. They're full of carbs. They do have estrogenic properties. I wouldn't recommend that you go overboard with them. Same thing. Okay, let's continue on the. So
What's good to eat?
I'm going to get to that. Okay. So you want to stay away from other things. I mentioned MSG briefly. I mentioned aspartame nitrates and nitrites. I've mentioned those things. High fructose corn syrup. This stuff is really, really bad. And in fact, the corn syrup lobby is now running these commercials saying, oh, don't worry. It's over-exaggerated. Corn syrup's really good for you. Food colorings, preservatives, pesticides, insecticides. You know, if you go to the shelf and pick a box off the shelf, and there's all these ingredients in there, you don't want to be eating something with 1,000 ingredients. It's probably not good for you. Mostly these things are fake. You want to eat real food. I'm going to get to that as the conclusion of my talk tonight. I have coined this term, etabolic stress is the title of my book, meaning that foods that you're eating that can contribute to stress that will make you sick. So what should I eat, doc, right, to maintain healthy cholesterol levels? See, because all these foods that you're eating that are bad for you will raise your cholesterol levels to a certain degree. And that may not be a bad thing, by the way, to have healthy cholesterol levels. What is a healthy cholesterol level is another question that needs to be asked. When I first started my medical training in 1982, which was 30 years ago, you can do the math, normal cholesterol was 240. And then they decided that 220 was a normal cholesterol. And then a few years later, they decided 200 was a normal cholesterol. And now they are saying that we should keep our LDL less than 100. And if we have a risk for heart disease, we should keep our LDL less than 70. Where did they get these numbers from? Show me the data. Show me the studies. I'd like to see them. I can tell you some studies have been done. Studies showing that the lower you make normal, the more people that become abnormal, the more people that need a drug to put them in the normal range. A lot of the labs will say that a desirable LDL is 0 to 100. And if you have 101 LDL, your doctor will have a flag on there saying it's high and out of range, and your doctor may be inclined to prescribe a drug. Let me tell you, I've never seen a patient with 0 cholesterol, even though it's desirable according to the labs. You know why I've never seen a patient with 0 cholesterol? Because they'd be dead. I've never seen a patient with a cholesterol less than 70 total cholesterol, because they'd be dead. This is very, very dangerous stuff.
So when you say cholesterol, would you break it down further by defining levels for HDL versus LDL, and where do triglycerides fall into that?
That's a very good question. And triglycerides are much more important than LDL, so-called bad cholesterol. In fact, there are many studies that show that the triglycerides, if they're high, and the HDL, if it's too low, this is the most important ratio. It's called metabolic syndrome. It will lead to high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, insulin resistance. How do you get high triglycerides? By eating too many carbohydrates. A high-carb, low-fat diet will cause diabetes. A low-fat, high-carb diet causes high blood pressure, causes heart disease, is very bad for you. This is the worst thing you can do. I have all this in my book. It's all explained. I have all the details in there, and I have all the studies, too, that show this. None of the things, just to say this again, I'm not making any of this stuff up. This is all real science. It's been hidden not only from you, the general public, it's been hidden from me as a doctor as well. The way these things are written, the way the conclusions come out, the way these things are reported is very biased.
What do you consider a healthy triglyceride?
What is a high triglyceride?
What do you consider
Healthy, right.
And also, does that vary based on sex or age?
Triglyceride levels, most of the labs will say it should be less than 150. My understanding is that it should be less than 100. It should be between 50 and 100 really is a normal, healthy triglyceride level. Yes?
I once read an article that said if your cholesterol, if your LDL goes down below 114, it could affect your brain.
You read an article saying that low LDL can hurt your brain, and that article is correct. Let me ask you a question. Where is the highest concentration of cholesterol in your body? In your brain. Why? Because cholesterol is concentrated in the nerve tissue to protect the nerve tissue from damage. How many people here have heard of myelin or demyelinating diseases, right? Multiple sclerosis, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also known as ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. These are diseases where the myelin actually falls apart. Myelin is 80% cholesterol. And since your brain has more nerve tissue than any other place in the body, yeah, so the highest concentration of cholesterol is in your brain. If your cholesterol levels are too low, you will suffer brain damage. And yet, there are people out there, doctors and nutritionists and experts, recommending that people with Alzheimer's disease go on a low-fat diet. And people with multiple sclerosis go on a low-fat diet. And people with ALS go on a low-fat diet. In fact, for every single disease out there, they're recommending a low-fat diet. And they say, why? Well, because everybody knows that saturated fat and cholesterol is bad. Everybody knows. Because everybody's been told this big fat lie. Not everybody, but the people that actually know the truth are in a minority. You are no longer in the minority. You have learned the truth. So how do you let's just finish up here and we'll take some questions. So what do you want to eat? You want to eat foods that don't cause excessive oxidative stress. You want to eat foods that are whole, that contain natural amounts of vitamins and minerals. You want to eat foods that do not interfere with thyroid function. And you want to eat foods that do not contain toxic materials. You want to eat real, natural food. So monounsaturated fats are very good for you. They do not cause oxidative stress. The saturated fats are probably one of the most important things. Forget probably. They are the most important thing that you can put in your body on a daily basis. Real saturated fat is very, very important. It doesn't burn. It will not oxidize very easily because it is saturated. Who here has heard that coconut is good for you? Raise your hand if you heard that coconut is good for you. A lot of people have heard this, right? Who've heard that coconut's bad for you? OK, why is coconut bad for you?
Because it has a high cholesterol. And
No, it has zero cholesterol. It has high in saturated fat.
Yeah.
So coconuts are bad because they're high in saturated fat. Yet they're good for you. Well, why are they good for you? Because they contain saturated fat. That's why they're good for you. Why do we put coconut oil on our skin for sunscreen to protect our skin? Because the saturated fat in the coconut oil protects your skin from the oxidation of the rays of the sun. You see, when you understand the truth and you hear the truth, everything will make sense instead of all these paradoxes. Well, ghee's a health food here, but it's not a health food here, and coconut's good, and coconut's bad, and eggs are good, and eggs are bad. This is all a bunch of propaganda.
Then why the doctors are saying the saturated fat is bad for your health?
Because we've been taught this over and over and over again in school. We've been taught things that aren't true. We've been taught to treat diseases This is not true at all. So you want to eat.
So you cannot trust anybody in this world then? That's what he's saying. Yes.
I am saying that you want to, if you're going to the doctor should really understand biochemistry, physiology, anatomy, how the human body works, not treating your diseases and your symptoms. You really want to go to someone who understands what's going on. Yes?
What should be the source of saturated fats?
I'm going to get to that in a moment.
Okay.
Other foods that are good to eat are fresh vegetables and unprocessed. Let's just talk about breast milk for a moment. Breast milk's good for babies, right? Yeah. Of course breast milk is good for babies. It's full of saturated fat. It's full of cholesterol. But you may say, well, babies have different requirements than adults, and the answer is that that's not true. Yes, sir?
So is the coconut oil is bad or good?
Coconut oil contains large amounts of saturated fat, hence it is good for you.
So it's good, right?
It's just like breast milk, good for you. This is a study that came out in January of 2010. It was published by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It was not publicized. The results were not on the news. They weren't anywhere. What were the results of this study? They looked at all the studies ever done on the relationship between saturated fat and cardiovascular disease, and they concluded that there's no way to, they concluded there's no association. Why didn't they publish this on the news? Because it's bad for business. You would think, it came out of Harvard, from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Did you hear about this study 2 years ago? No. But you're going to hear about this. Eggs are as bad as smoking cigarettes for the next 6 weeks. Why? Because that's good for business. Unless you're in the egg business, of course, right? Here's another study. Low intake of saturated fat actually lowers your HDL. Really, the good cholesterol. This comes from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And they concluded that in controlled trials, low-fat, high-carb diets decrease HDL. The effect is strongest when carbohydrates replace saturated fatty acids. This is the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. Not me. This is them. This is the science. If you want to raise your good cholesterol, what do? According to the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, you must eat saturated fat. Low intake of saturated fat lowers sex hormone levels. When men were transferred from their customary diet to diets that had more polyunsaturated oils, things like soy oil and canola oil and other vegetable oils, and less saturated fat, there was a significant decrease in serum testosterone levels. Why? Because we make our hormones from cholesterol. All your sex hormones come from cholesterol. Your adrenal cortical hormones come from cholesterol. We have to make them from something. This was a study that actually was reported on. You may remember it briefly. It was reported for about 5 minutes, and then they pulled it off the air. This is from the New England Journal of Medicine, 2008. They compared 3 diets. The first diet, low-fat, restricted calorie. In other words, eat low-fat and starve yourself. This was the Pritikin diet. Or the Mediterranean diet, eat Mediterranean style, meaning lots of olive oil and nuts, and starve yourself, restricted calorie. Or eat low-carb, non-restricted calorie. Eat as much as you want, but just keep the carbs low. So what would you choose? Would you choose to starve yourself and eat low-fat, starve yourself and eat Mediterranean, or eat as much as you want and keep the carbs low? Probably the third diet, right? OK, but you're not going to lose weight with that, will you? The mean weight loss was 2.9 kilograms for the low-fat starve yourself group, 4.4 kilograms for the Mediterranean diet starve yourself group, and 4.7 kilograms for the eat as much as you want, keep the carbs low group. Well, eat as much as you want, lose the most weight. Gee, that sounds pretty good. It's going to clog your arteries, though, right? It's going to be bad for your heart, right? The relative reduction in the total cholesterol to high-density lipoprotein, in other words, favorable lipoprotein ratios, 20% in the low-carb group, 12% in the low-fat group. In other words, the low-carb diet, eat as much as you want, lose the most weight, and it has the most favorable effects on your lipid profile. This is not my opinion.
Wasn't this the Dr. Atkins diet?
Yes. This was Atkins versus Pritikin versus Mediterranean. Yeah, this was reported very briefly. Believe me, if it showed the exact opposite, they would have harped on it like the egg and smoking cigarette thing for the next God knows how long. But they dropped this story like a hot potato very quickly because it's bad for business. And there's many, 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 many other studies all show the same things. Why? Because it's the truth. There's no paradox here. Oh, Atkins, it's bad for you. It'll clog your arteries. And by the way, I'm not recommending an Atkins diet, okay? Atkins really didn't control for eating bacon and burnt meat and all other things. I think it was way too restrictive. But I'm using this as an example, okay? But this paradox, well, yeah, it does help you lose weight, but nobody knows why. Or, yeah, well, it does help some people with their heart disease, but nobody knows why. And when you hear nobody knows why, okay, this is a bunch of hot air. Did they ask everybody? And nobody knew? They didn't ask me. Okay, so you want to have foods that don't, you want to have your foods that are whole, that don't interfere with thyroid function. And so basically, what do you want to eat? You want to eat 3 meals every day. And every meal should contain a serving of meat, fish, poultry, eggs, or cheese. What's wrong with red meat? There's nothing. What's wrong with the color of your meat? Red meat's bad because it has a little higher cholesterol than some other meat. That's why it's bad. And that's why fish is good. No, it's not. This is all part of the big fat lie. You want to eat plenty of low-starch vegetables. These things will not raise your sugar levels. They'll fill you up. They have plenty of minerals in them.
What vegetables are low-starch?
Low-starch vegetables are things that are light, leafy, things like spinach and cauliflower and asparagus and string beans and peas. Things that are high in starch you can throw through a window, like a potato or a carrot or squash. Yes, sir?
Can you touch a little bit on meat? I mean, you're saying to eat meat, but don't we also have to worry about what's in the meat and how it's produced?
Well, that's processed meat. That's poison meat. I'm not telling you to eat poison meat. Yes, you're absolutely correct.
I mean.
There's no argument there. You also have to worry about poison vegetables, too, right? This thing, oh, don't eat meat because it's poison. Well, don't eat the vegetables because they're poison also. Yes, you're better off eating free-range, grass-fed, organic stuff. Absolutely no doubt about it. This is part of the food chain. But just because it's been poisoned doesn't mean you should avoid meat in general. You should avoid poison meat, processed meat, burnt meat, cured meat. Absolutely no argument there. You want to limit your intake of sugar, including fruit. Fruit is one of the most overhyped foods out there. Now everyone's going to start throwing tomatoes at me. It's full of sugar. I tell my patients, if you're overweight, if you're diabetic, you should not eat fruit. But Doc, isn't there good stuff in fruit? Yes, but there's lots of sugar in the fruit. Oh, but isn't the sugar in fruit better than the regular sugar? No. It's got something called fructose, fruit sugar, which is the worst sugar you could possibly put in your body. But I thought this was the good sugar, Doc. Well, you've been lied to. This is another lie that you've been fed that's making you sick and overweight and raising your blood pressure and causing diabetes and heart disease. You want to avoid juice. This whole nonsense about juicing, especially fruits, it's terrible. And sweetened beverages, sugar is really, really toxic. Get it out of your system. Spring water should be your main drink. Oh, but Doc, that's so boring to drink water. It's boring because your palate is used to sweetness every moment of the day. Let me tell you, I don't eat any sweets at all, except I actually had some sweets a couple of weeks ago. Why? I had a little bit of my birthday cake. I have a little sugar like Thanksgiving, my birthday, and maybe one, random day of the year, and that's pretty much it.
Are there alternatives for including sweets like honey? Would you recommend that?
No. It's sugar. It's high in fructose.
So
Does honey have
sweet?
Does honey have stuff in it that's good for you? Absolutely. But the sugar in there is not good for you.
How about juicing vegetables?
Juicing vegetables is not very natural to begin with, right? They didn't juice vegetables 1,000 years ago. And you're concentrating all these minerals all at the same time and all this stuff at the same time. It's very, very unnatural and can cause disturbances in your body chemistry. I don't recommend these things. I recommend eating whole foods, real foods that are non-processed, not burnt, not fried, not cured.
How about raw versus steamed? Is there any
You talking about vegetables? Raw vegetables are hard to digest. The human body doesn't digest it very well. We have 3 more minutes. So you want to have lightly steamed vegetables is probably the best way to go. You don't want to overcook your vegetables either because that's bad.
So if you are on medication, is that you are waiting off medication by following that type of
If you're on what kind of medication?
like statin drug?
Okay, the question is, if you're on a statin drug, can you get off the drug because you're on a proper diet? Well, it depends on what is your goal. Why are you on that drug in the first place? Statin drugs have been shown to reduce the incidence of a second heart attack in males. That's it. Have you had a heart attack? Okay, you are a female, I assume, right? Okay. There is no evidence that statins have helped women of any age for any reason. Statin drugs lower your cholesterol. That's probably not why they work, by the way. They have other properties. Statin drugs have antifungal properties and anti-inflammatory properties. And that's probably why they actually have some cardioprotective effects. That's not even a reason to use them, though, because there's other things that have better anti-inflammatory effects and better antifungal effects, if that's what you're looking for. I personally have never prescribed a statin drug in my career. I've taken hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patients off of statin drugs. Nobody in the room, by the way, should make any medical decisions based on my talk tonight. This is for information only. If you want to be a patient of mine and come in and under medical supervision stop taking a statin drug or other drugs, that's what I do. I help get people off of medications and put them on real food and maybe particular supplements to help them normalize their body chemistry so that they're going to be healthy. Will blood pressure medicine raise your cholesterol? Some of them can do that, yes. So we're gonna wrap up. I will take a few more questions, but this is the end of the broadcast. I'd like to thank Edison Library for inviting me tonight. I'd also like to thank the audience tonight. You guys have been fantastic. All right, thank you very much.